Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Wolpe.
Chairman, for purposes of closing the debate, I yield to the principal author of the legislation that is before us, the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Dellums.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and Mr. Chairman, members of the body, it's with a great deal of pride and sense of privilege and honor that I have the opportunity to close this debate. 2 decades ago, people said, take your anger, your frustration, your pain, your hopes and your dreams and your aspirations inside the political process. Come inside off the streets of protest and demonstration. Challenge people in the halls of Congress. Legitimate the ideas you choose to espouse. Well, in that process, Mr. Chairman, members of the body, you folks taught me humility. I'm an activist, but you taught me patience. I am a fighter, but you taught me discipline. Because it was nearly 18 years ago, Mr. Chairman, that this gentleman and the distinguished gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, we embarked upon this long journey to bring us to this moment, because it was at that time that we brought the first effort to bring sanctions against South Africa. Not only because we saw ourselves as citizens of the United States, black human beings as well, but also citizens of the world. Secondly, I would point out to my colleagues, Mr. Chairman, and members of this committee, to challenge the cruelty and the oppression of apartheid in South Africa is not a liberal issue. It's not a conservative issue, not a moderate issue, not a Democratic issue, not a Republican issue. It is an American issue, as American as apple pie, because we are ostensibly a nation committed to democratic principles, the rule of law, and constitutional government. We would be living in a world of contradiction, Mr. Chairman, if we did not stand and oppose. Mr. Chairman, someone said in the earlier part of the general debate, this approach is a little heavy. Let me tell you, Mr. Chairman, what heavy is. Beating, torture, rape, murder by South African security forces and prison officials is more than a little heavy. What is heavy is detainment without trial of thousands of human beings, 40% of them children, many of them 8 to 10 years of age. Now that's heavy. Repression of the press is heavy. Banning opposition groups, even nonviolent anti-apartheid groups in South Africa, is heavy. Denial to a majority population of any political rights or power on the insane and absurd notion of racial supremacy, I would say to my colleagues, is what's heavy. Denying the opportunity of people to live a life where we embrace the principles that all human beings, black, brown, red, yellow, and white, are equal human beings, that all human beings have control of their destiny. That is heavy if we're not prepared to deal with it. We are a great nation, Mr. Chairman, members of this committee, a great nation. And you and I at this moment must rise above our petty differences, irrespective of where we stand on the political spectrum, Democrat, Republican. Some of my colleagues even said to me in the back of the aisle, I've been with you, but I'm down on this rule so bad, I'm so upset with the leadership that I can't vote with you. Let me tell you something. Do not underestimate the power of this issue. Each of us will have to go home and talk about it. Yes, South Africa is over there, but this issue is as much about the United States as it is about South Africa. And every single one of your constituents, if they see you not prepared to challenge this madness, then they say, what happens when they come for me? If you're not prepared to stand up for black people and people of color in South Africa, in this great bastion of democracy, what will happen when they come for me? So let us rise above this difference. Whatever the rule was, I didn't create it. But I came here to fight to see that this world is a dignified world. I want to turn over to my children and my children's children a world without racism and terrorism, violence, death, and destruction. And I placed my body and my life and my energy on the line. I've come here struggling. You made me learn discipline. You made me struggle for 18 years. But it's time for the world to wake up. We cannot continue to harm and kill and maim and rape and torture people because their skin happens to be black. There's something wrong with that. Mr. Chairman, let me tell you in a few brief moments a brief story. On Wednesday at the convention, I met a delightful, marvelous, thin, almost fragile young South African. I met him a couple of nights before. He was very pleased to meet me because of my efforts on the part of South Africa. I was not to know that the second time I would meet him, I would feel great pain because he sought me out in the lobby of the Hilton Hotel in Atlanta. And I saw in his face that he was quite troubled. He said, "I want to help you pass this bill." And I said, "What is wrong?" He said, "I just received a call from my mother in Johannesburg. There had been a bombing. My two brothers have been killed." And he struggled to fight back the tears. And I reached out to him because he was young enough to be my son. And he looked me in the eyes, a look that I would never forget. And he said, "There must be a better way. I've lost my wife and my child and now my two brothers." And he fell into my arms. And I will say to you, Mr. Chairman, members of this body, he and I hugged and embraced in brotherhood and camaraderie and sense of compassion. And we cried unabashed and unashamed. And I decided that I would renew my effort. Come hell or high water, we'll continue to struggle until South Africa is free. And he's right, there must be a better way. I listened to all of the debates here. It's going to hurt blacks. It's going to hurt corporations. It might jeopardize national security. Some of those things are maybes, but I'll tell you what's an inevitable fact. And that is that human beings who languish in repression will struggle for their freedom in peace if they can, in violence if they must. That pales every single argument that you've raised, because the technology of death in 1988, you and I know, means that thousands of human beings will die beyond any human being's ability to comprehend. Those of you who think imposing sanctions will bring violence, I come to a different conclusion. It works for those people in power. They're not going to change until you make it not work. Do not live in such an absurd and mundane and pedestrian and naive world. This is reality here. I do not wish to see violence and bloodshed. So let us rise above these differences here. Rise above all these different rules and concerns. I'm now asking you, as a black American, as a black earthbound citizen, we must end the madness of apartheid. Let us turn over to our children a world without this insanity, without this cruelty. Yes, sanctions hurt. And I've said 1,000 times, and I'll say it again, but sanctions kill. But apartheid kills, and it kills violently. Whether it kills officially from the government or whether it kills by denying hope from people so that they feel so desperately that they must engage in violence that ends up in the death of human beings. That is violence. And I came here not a warlike person. I came here to channel my anger and to channel my energy. I am advocate of peace, and I'm struggling hard to be a peaceful person, and that's not always easy in these chambers. You know that. You know that, Mr. Chairman, members of this body. But we must get beyond this. We must become civilized human beings. America says it's committed to freedom and dignity. I ask you, Mr. Chairman, and members of this body, rise above all of our petty differences. This is an American issue, and as Americans, let's raise up and stand up and join those people in South Africa struggling for their freedom and dignity, and it'll be a great moment in American history, and I thank all of you.